What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today I want to talk to you about SoundHound. I want to go over some expectations for this upcoming week, what might cause some volatility in the stock price, and the latest in updates. So I want to go over all the things that you need to know, but first make sure to hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So starting off with data points, it is a shorter week. On a side note, July the 4th, Independence Day, the market is closed. So happy day to all the Americans out there. Aside from that though, Monday you have a couple Fed speakers, but it is going to be a labor data type of week, in addition to a couple other things which I'll go over. But Tuesday, manufacturing and jolt numbers. Then Wednesday, you don't really have all too much. ADP employment could potentially move the market, but lately not really, like it hasn't really been paid too much attention to lately. But Thursday, non-farm payroll and also unemployment. And so that potentially could move the market, because Powell recently did mention that he's not really looking at the inflationary data, rather the labor data to justify rate cuts. So this week is going to be key for that. So you might see a lot of hot topics throughout the week. Aside from that though, the other thing that's going to really impact the market is tariffs. So Trump did kind of drop a little bit of a bomb on Friday, saying that they're not going to be negotiating with Canada anymore. So market kind of pulled back a little bit during this period, but with their trade deadline being the 9th, July the 9th, a lot of people are going to be assuming that deals are going to be coming in. I believe even the White House mentioned, and 𝗪𝗧𝗛, that there was going to be deals coming before July the 4th. So dependent on kind of the results and so forth, that could really move the market. In addition to that, you do have the S&P. Next strong real point is 6250. So if it does continue this good momentum, then it might potentially struggle with that 6250. So again, something to keep in mind. But SoundHound, honestly, over the last 5 days did go up 6.44%. So pretty good stuff. There was one thing that did come out, not officially, because there hasn't been any official news from SoundHound since June the 17th. So they've been somewhat slipping on that, but want to give a shout out to this individual, String Square on Reddit. They did see this, and so ultimately a new partnership with IHOP and also Applebee's. So at the very bottom right down here goes over like what it means for those companies, but it says right here how partnering with SoundHound AI Inc. So yeah, this is one of those things that SoundHound, in my opinion, is really dropping the ball on, and that they need to put something out, unless they're maybe just waiting for their upcoming earnings to disclose this, which I feel like isn't really the best idea. But nonetheless, this is a pretty good partnership for SoundHound, and hopefully more of these do come down the pipeline. I think everyone cares about McDonald's, so that one would be a massive one, but that could potentially impact the market if SoundHound does put out some news, so it might help SoundHound stock price. Aside from that, for shorts, going into this week, 34.1% of the free float is being shorted, works to be 123 million shares overall are being shorted. So as of right now, we are officially at the all-time high short interest. So you can see from this line right here, we are at all-time highs. So kind of crazy stuff when it comes to that. Cost of borrow average 6.85. So just on a side note, so whenever there is a long weekend, shorts do typically return, only because they don't have to pay one unnecessary day. So you might see shorts, surprisingly, on maybe Wednesday, possibly even Thursday, start to return. But anticipate them to be fairly active as well, dependent on some of the data, such as jolt numbers and like obviously the unemployment and whatever else. Aside from all of that though, with it closing at 983, that does mean that the 950 and below strike prices essentially are in the money. So you have 4,000 at that 950, and that's basically it. So you're not going to see any bump up come Monday, as market makers will have to cover these. So it's going to be kind of quiet from them. But from the bulls, you see a consensus for it to be above roughly 1050 going into this week. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub roughly 9 to 950. So that's kind of the parameters to somewhat pay attention to. Aside from that, with it at 983, it is trading between this R1 and the pivot. So 958 is going to be a strong support. 987 is going to be the next strong target / resistance. And clearly it is relatively strong, but over the last couple of trading days, we've seen a lot of volatility. So 1005 and then 1035 is going to be the also next strong target / resistance points. And like I said, over the last couple of days, it has kind of spread itself between this R3 and the pivot numerous times. So anticipate a lot of volatility this upcoming week. And aside from all that though, looking on the actual chart itself, so it is still wedge bound between that 50-day moving average and that 100. So those are some points to watch for. So 991 is going to be that 100-day moving average, and then that 50-day moving average is 973. So if it does break below that 50-day moving average, this is where historically kind of causes a little bit of a pullback, roughly about 20 to 30% on average, so something to keep in mind. But with SoundHound gaining some pretty good traction over the last week, it did cause the stochastic RSI to be considered overbought. So what that ultimately means is the first sign of weakness associated to SoundHound or the broader market, you could see a pullback. But SoundHound's not really putting out any news, good, bad, or the ugly. So I think, if anything, it's going to be data, so macro related, or potentially tariff related, that might cause a little bit of a pullback. So let me know your general thoughts on SoundHound. I feel like if it does pull back this upcoming week, it would be a pretty good deal in my opinion, because I think given the circumstances, buying the dip is the correct mentality given the circumstances and what has actually happened. But I do feel by the end of the week, SoundHound actually will be moving higher. So probably between this R3 and this R2 is where it will settle most likely. So between that 1035 and 1005. But that being said, anticipate this pivot point to be touched, possibly even this S1 in the foreseeable future. So let me know your thoughts on SoundHound. Are you planning on buying? What's your viewpoint on this new partnership that they did announce? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's still too gray for us to determine if it's positive or not? One thing to take note of though, it does say June 2025, doesn't actually have any set date, but clearly we might be seeing some additional videos coming out of maybe people seeing it in Applebee's or IHOP. So if anyone does, definitely post it on Reddit or on Twitter or whatever else. So let me know your viewpoint. Where do you see things going? So throw your price predictions in the comments below. One final thing, pop over to my Patreon if you are looking for some good buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, many of which have been absolutely on point and bangers. Definitely worthwhile to pop over there and take a look. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.